Hey everybody, What's It Fox Gaming here. So what I wanted to do today was try and use a different type of weapon in a PvP environment. This is the low mag high damage LMG archetype. There are a couple of different weapons within this archetype and you literally never see these used. I think the main reason for that is that they perform very similarly to a low rate of fire AR. They tend to have relatively similar stats. I don't actually have one on me at the moment, but yeah, so they, like a lot of LMGs, they are quite inaccurate. Their handling is usually poor. Their reload speeds are quite high. So what I've done here, like I do with a lot of my videos, is try to enhance the strengths of a particular weapon type and eradicate its weaknesses. And with this build, I feel that I may have done that successfully. So I'm using today the new Reliable, so this could be classed as part of my named item series, but this is also a PvP build that you can try out. I did just test this in a game. Unfortunately, we only loaded in with 2 people against 4, and obviously we got slapped. We only had 3 people by the end, but I still hit a huge amount of damage. And the reason for that is sort of the combination of pieces I'm using here in conjunction with playing to the strengths of this particular archetype. So of course you get your more traditional LMGs, I don't actually have any on me so we should go to my stash really, that typically have relatively low damage but high mag counts. The MG5 is a bit of an exception because that does hit really hard, but it is a bit of a beast. So this type here, so like the RPK-74 for example, these are a lot more stable. Their accuracy is typically better, but they usually have low mag counts. You combine it, you can compare it to, let's find another one that's sort of 650. No, there isn't one, is there? Yeah, so they always have like very high damage per bullet. We'll compare it actually to an AK because I think that's where how I'm going to play it, similar to a low rate of fire hard hitting AK, is these are quite inaccurate as well. So usually you don't go for headshots, you just sort of play relatively close range. So my Black Marker AKM here, which is a pretty nice roll, and this is with no Fenris on my build, at 600 RPM, hits for 116k. A similar weapon, the RPK, which is basically what I'm running now, hits a little bit less, but the RPM is slightly higher, so in theory it hits about the same as something like an AKM, and they hit pretty hard at the moment. The advantage of LMGs is their core attribute is damage to targets out of cover, and honestly I had to use this weapon just because the way that it dropped. It actually dropped as a triple god roll, but it was accuracy I think as the attribute. So the only 2 weapons in the game that can roll the 2 multiplicative damage attributes, which is damage to targets out of cover and damage to armor, are LMGs and shotguns. Shotguns has a core attribute of damage to armor, so that's higher. So they technically do more damage because the 2 stats, I think it's like 10 and 12%, and this is 12 and 6%. But damage to targets out of cover and damage to armor are both multiplicative damage, so they're calculated at the end of the equation when the game figures out how all the damage is done, which means they basically do more. That's the kind of thing that you're looking out for. So what I tried to do was enhance those 2 things there. I've gone for the Contractor's Gloves, the named Petrov, and the Fox's Prayer, which is the named Overlord, because as you probably all know from your PvE builds, damage to targets out of cover comes by default on the Fox's Prayer, and damage to armor by default comes on the Contractor's. So I'm stacking that on top of what I'm already getting with this weapon, which means in theory, if anybody stood in the open, which they absolutely always will be in the DZ, if you're sat in cover, you're going to die anyway, so that's kind of irrelevant, but people always play out of cover, and of course they have armor. Just by stacking these 2 named gear items with this named weapon, or just any LMG really, in theory I should be hitting a lot harder than an AR. The main weakness of LMGs is of course their accuracy, because an AR has a nice clean crosshair. They're usually very stable, they're very reliable. That's kind of where they're used. So for example, that's a FAMAS or that's an AR sight. It's just a nice precise sight. It's easy to sort of land your headshots. And with an LMG, the way that they work is their bloom gets smaller the longer you fire, so that the crosshair accuracy becomes tighter. But yeah, I think that these could be quite strong. I think it's mainly their attributes that make them strong, the fact they hit really hard per bullet. What I've done to sort of negate that poor accuracy is I've gone for the perfectly optimized new Reliable, the named RPK, because this gives you that 30% weapon handling, so that's really going to help my accuracy, stability, and also reload speed. These have a much better reload speed than the larger LMG counterparts. This is only 2.1, and I'm going to be shaving 30% off of that. I decided to run 2 pieces of Petrov as well, because they also give me weapon handling, so that's now 40%. So I think that's the best way to play with this type of archetype. Yes, they hit really hard. Yes, they absolutely smash out some damage in close quarters, but at range they're pretty poor because of the kick and accuracy, and you can't land your headshots. By stacking all this weapon handling, I feel that I've kind of circumvented that weakness, or at least I hope I have. So that's why I've gone for the double Petrov there. I've only put 2 blues on this build because I want to just sort of play this as a damage build. I don't want to be right in the front line just using Intimidate or anything. I want to use this like an LMG typically would use, sort of not necessarily sat in cover, but in the back lines pumping out a lot of damage. Because I'm only running 2 blues, I did like to throw a Giller in there because it just helps to buff up your armour a little bit more without 5% total, and this rolled quite nicely, so I was able to just put Unbreakable on it for the survivability. And then I've got a Grupo Sombra here, which again rolled quite well, so I just re-rolled that to blue. I opted to go for the Coyotes because it was a little bit rough to get my critical hit chance and damage too high without really losing out on some weapon handling, and that, I don't want to say a problem, but the fact that now you really want to factor in weapon handling on most of your builds, it means you are going to be taking a hit somewhere else, which 9 times out of 10 is critical hit chance and damage. If you go to my stats, you can see that I'm just going to say 50%, it's 0.1% off. 50 and 120, which is really good, and that's why I'm using the Coyotes. I didn't want to put on a Seska to get that to 60. I thought, well, I'm going to get the 10% from this anyway because I'm going to be playing in that 15 to 25 metre range, so I'm giving myself the 10% critical hit chance, which buffs me to the 60 cap, and the 10% critical hit damage, which gets me to 130, and that's also going to apply to the rest of my team. If I do happen to get close range, I'm going to be doing 25% critical hit damage, and I'm still at 50% chance anyway, so half my bullets will just hit 145% harder, and again that'll apply to my team. So I felt this was a smart choice here. So yeah, I'm going to load this into a game now. I'm going to show you how I play the build. I had a pretty good game last time, even though the team lost because obviously we were outnumbered 2-4. But I do genuinely feel that running these 2 named items to buff up the damage to targets that are covering damage to armour. If you look here, that's at 14%. It doesn't show you damage to targets that are covered weirdly. I don't know why, but it's going to be at where is it? 8% plus 12, so 20%. 20% multiplicative damage is ridiculous, and that's of course on top of the 8 plus 6 here. So yeah, I think this is going to perform really well. I'm quite looking forward to trying this. I decided to go for Companion just because I wanted a straightforward, don't have to think about it, weapon damage buff. And for builds where I'm theory crafting, I always like to, before I really perfect them, I always like to have 1 damage talent, which I usually apply to the backpack, and then Unbreakable or some form of survivability talent, such as Efficient or Unbreakable. So Companion's really good because I don't have to use my skills. I can just be in range of an ally and still get that 15% extra damage. But just to be safe, I've gone for the Defender Drone to give me some more HP, and I've gone for Stinger Hive because I can just place that at my feet if somebody's rushing me, to keep that Companion active, whilst of course applying the bleed to them. How you build this is entirely up to you. I do think that LMGs shouldn't be built as a armor build. I think they should be built as a very high red build, because the whole point of them, if you look at those core attributes there, is to perform damage. It's not sustained damage. Well, normally they're sustained damage, but I want this to be a burst damage weapon, and that's where I think this archetype, the lower mag, high damage, lower rate of fire LMGs perform better. They're more burst, whereas in something like a Negev, a Pestilence, an MG5, they're absolutely sustained damage. They do not burst down very quickly unless you've got an unhinged beast. So yeah, let's see how this performs then. I'm going to play it just like an AR, and hope that with all these extra damage buffs that I can just murder everyone. If anybody else has been using these type of weapons, please do let me know in the comments what you think to them. If you've got a particular build that you found works really well for you. I haven't quite figured out the best talents to run with them, and I do think in PvP you are a little bit limited compared to PvE, so I don't think I've made a poor choice here. But if anybody else has got a nice little secret winning formula, just drop your build in the comments, and I'll try it out for myself and credit you in a future video and see how well that works. We have actually very recently hit, I believe, just over 400 subscribers in total now since the channel opened just 2 months ago. So let me have a quick look. Yeah, 400 as of the release of this video. We're currently at 405 subscribers, which is fantastic. Nearly sort of well over 350 of those have just been within the last 28 days, so that's a lot of growth for the channel in a very small window. So again, like I always say, thank you very much for the continued support, and what I'm really looking for now that I've got more subscribers is some more build ideas. I really want to either run with one of you, we can stream together and I can showcase your build by either playing it or playing with you playing the build, or I can just credit you for it and essentially copy and paste your build. I have quite a lot of pieces sat in my stash, so that's really what I'm looking for now. If you can drop in the comments any builds that you've been testing out that you think are quite underrated, that you don't see very often, that you want to get out there, let me know by messaging me directly on Xbox. It's just What's It Fox with a space in the middle, or dropping a comment on, of course, in the comments below. And like I said before, I will credit you for it, and play the build, and yeah, hopefully it'll be a good one. So what we're up against, I'm really hoping we get some high armor targets here. That's kind of where I think this build is going to perform well, and so far these guys are all... there we go, perfect. So this dude here, I'm going to try and focus him down. I know usually you go for the low armor, they should be your priority in any conflict and DZ game, but I'm actually going to prioritise the armor people here because I want to see just how quickly I can melt them down. Obviously it's not always easy to do that. If I've got two sort of low armor dudes in my face, I'm going to have to try and kill them, but yeah, that's where I think this build is going to excel. A lot of the time you get these real tanky characters that will just run around and regen their armor, whilst the higher sort of skill builders, status builders and weapon damage builders will be in the back, essentially cleaning up whilst the tank does his job, which is to distract your team. So the way I feel the strength of this build would be to get rid of the tank. So I'm really hoping that their team play like that the other three lower armor dudes play behind the tank. And I think if you're coming up against some tanky builds in the DZ, putting on one of these weapons, specifically with the Fox's Prayer and the Contractor's Gloves, might actually be a really smart choice. Or it could be completely wrong and I'm about to get destroyed here, but we'll see, we'll see. There are a couple of named weapons in this particular archetype, like the 600, 650 low bullet mag. You've got the Tabula Rasa, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, the new reliable, and I think there's a perfect steady-handed as well, or is that the Tabula? I can't remember, I'm sure there's three, but you'll have to let me know in the comments if I'm forgetting one or if I'm just making the third one up.
Rogue, airburst, seeker mine detected.
Ooh, airburst. Where's the tank, where's the tank, where's the tank? Wow, he got dropped. Oh, I see what you're doing there, buddy, I see what you're doing there. No!
Agent down.
Ah, I thought that guy was going to pull the res. So we're going to have to watch out for those foamers. This build doesn't have any hazard protection. I should have just stood my ground and killed him there. They still would have killed me, but I think I could have gotten that second kill. But it certainly dropped that other guy pretty quickly. I may even have to incorporate this into my my 3-piece strikers build for the extra handling and the rate of fire, just to really melt quickly and lose a lot of critical hit chance and damage.
Agent down.
Oof, did he try and jump over the fence there? Someone just punched him, so they must be very close range.
Explosive seeker mine detected.
Okay, there's a tank, this is what I want to see. Oh wow, I was right, okay, yeah, that absolutely drops tanks down.
Agent incapacitated.
Team, why am my team not pushing? Oh my goodness, guys, why are you sitting back there? That's a shame. Again, this is one of the perils of solo queuing. I am on comms, so these guys can hear me, but as I stated in my previous tank build video, one of the downsides of solo queuing is everybody has their own idea. What I was really hoping would happen there is as soon as I engaged, my team just ran in. But yeah, that demonstrated just the power there. That guy has, what was he on, 4 blues, possibly 5, so he's got at least 1.5, 1.6 million armour, and he got dropped, and there was nobody else shooting into him there until afterwards. Where are these guys hiding? Okay, they're pushing the right, so I'm going to push the left. Let's see if we can get a dirty flank on these boys. We do have a 3-point lead, so that's good so far. So I'm not going to play. Oh, he's a tank again. Here he is. I weren't happy that time. I'm going to get the hive down now because that's just run out. Try and get the headshots if we can. I'm going to get the heal off in time. No! Ah, so close. So close. But yeah, that was a great example there. I was up against 2 people. I have only 2 blue cores, but I was able to survive a good chunk of that because I killed him so quickly that obviously they went down to just 1 person doing damage. I thought I was on the flank there and my team were engaging, but
Agent
unfortunately they
down.
all came to my side, which is not much you can do about if you're not in comms. Oh, actually, this guy is talking. I just saw his name flash up in the top right. Hello, can you hear me, buddy? Hello, hello, hello. Oh, okay. I guess, not sure what that's all about.
Boost about to expire.
Let's try this from range.
The boost
Okay,
is
not
being
as good
taken
from
by the
range, which
enemy.
is... No, he's...
And the enemy has acquired the boost.
Wow, okay, this is a really good test this now.
Rogue airburst seeker mine detected.
Pull back, buddy, pull back.
Under firefly detected. An agent
Oh, this is really bad positioning here. Got a dip. Let's see if I can come up behind this guy. Probably should heal up here really, but I don't like to use a medkit if I can avoid it. Come on, stick your head out. Yeah, it feels about as reliable as an LMG. It's behind me. Sorry, it is an LMG. It feels about as reliable as an AR. Ooh. This game's going pretty well for us so far. I'm looking forward to seeing my damage stats at the end. I think my team have been pretty much carrying me here, but yeah, I'm liking this. I think definitely against lower armor players, weirdly, it's not as good. And I know that sounds strange, but it definitely seems to fare a lot better against tanks, just because a lot of the time they're not moving around as much. Like people that have low armor, they typically stay in cover, they play back. That kind of range we do struggle a little bit. Tanks are usually more on the front lines. They're, in theory, a bigger target for me to hit, and that's where I can really take advantage of the damage to arm and damage to targets out of cover. And that tank guy, I've slapped him. I've absolutely melted him. Even at the times where I've died, I've done so much damage. Oh, that dog is going absolutely crazy for some reason. What's he getting excited about? Oh, I better go make sure that no one's trying to break into our house, I suppose.
An agent needs assistance.
That's funny, just barking at somebody out the window. We have two dogs, a big black lab, and he's as chilled out as you can imagine, and a tiny little Jack Russell, which, as I'm sure you all know, is a yippy little monster. He's a good boy, but he's quite noisy. Yep, I'm liking the feel of this. It feels as reliable as an AR. It's just a headshot damage that you're going to lose out on, at least from range, but certainly up close. It's pretty good. Nice. Okay. Yeah, I'm happy with that game. So I think I'm going to try and incorporate this a little bit more into my builds. ARs are really strong at the moment, and they're getting a 9% buff as of TU 10.1, which as of the release of this video is probably about a week and a half away. So yeah, I think this could do really well. I'm really liking the core attributes that you get with LMGs, and the fact that the core attribute of an AR is damage to health, which is utterly pointless in PvP. I mean, yes, it kind of helps when you break through their armor, but that's such a tiny percentage of their total sort of health pool. A small percentage of it usually is health. That I'm not fussed about that. I just feel that the core attributes of LMGs are better, and I feel that this archetype is the best one to use. So that's a pretty good score there. I thought actually I was being carried by my team, but to be fair, I put in quite a lot of work there. 28 million damage, 9 kills, 3 deaths, so I did die a bit more than I should have done, and that probably is attributed to my low armor. But yeah, I'm happy with that. It's a shame it doesn't show accuracy stats in this game, but I think that's better than I was expecting. And I do feel that if you come up against a very tanky team, this is where the build performs. I can't really explain why, I just feel that against tanks this is better, and against a bunch of low armours, you know, players, it's not going to be as good. And I think if I had to guess, it would usually be just because they play from, well, one, because they usually play from range or behind cover or behind their team, and two, the moment they start to take damage they usually dip, so they're a harder target. What a lot of tanks will do is they're used to surviving for longer, so they'll stay their ground, and before they realise it, you've melted so much of their armour down that they weren't quite expecting it. So yeah, I think if you come in against a tanky team, this might be a really strong weapon to use, because you burst them down so hard. Let me know what you think in the comments. You know, if you, like I said before, if you've got any variations of this build that work really well for you, or if you prefer the bigger mag, lower damage LMGs, Bullet King could be a good example because of the no reload. Let me know in the comments. I'm really curious to hear if there's any other variants. I'll try them out, but I think I'm going to start including this type of archetype in my builds. Well, thank you very much if you did stick through to the end. I hope you enjoyed that conflict footage there, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace!